September 9th, 1988, at Monza, the Temple of Speed. Grandstands are already packed for the Italian Grand Prix, but a historic anomaly is about to unfold before our eyes. But as we examine the records, nothing about to happen was scheduled on any official Grand Prix program. The crowd has no idea. Enter Riccardo Patrese, historically one of the fastest and most strategically underrated drivers of his generation. He just climbed out of his Judd-powered Williams after Friday practice. Before he can even unsuit strategic maneuvers behind the scenes, force him into something completely different. From the outside, it looks like a standard four-door sedan, the kind parked on any ordinary Italian street. But when Patrese turns the key, the strategic illusion instantly shatters. The sound erupting from that anonymous chassis has absolutely nothing to do with a family sedan. It is a violent, metallic scream, climbing all the way to 13,000 revolutions per minute. The grandstands fall silent in disbelief before exploding in a roar. This vehicle, disguised as a grocery getter, is about to touch 340 kilometers per hour on the main straight. Faster than any Formula One machine on track that weekend. How did we reach this highly surreal historical moment? To decode this absolute madness on wheels that stunned even veteran mechanics, we must investigate a chaotic chapter of Alfa Romeo history, back when the legendary manufacturer was fighting desperately for its strategic survival, fighting battles on too many fronts and losing almost all of them. By the mid-'80s, this historically glorious brand was practically on its knees. The Milanese manufacturer that once dominated the very first Formula One World Championships with absolute legends like Nino Farina and Juan Manuel Fangio was reduced to a tragic, uncompetitive backmarker in elite motorsport. Their 1979 return after 3 decades away proved strategically disastrous. Their flat 12 engines, though powerful, were far too bulky for modern chassis design, becoming completely obsolete under new ground effect regulations. Their wide layout blocked the crucial Venturi tunnels beneath the chassis, destroying the aerodynamic downforce required to win. In a desperate reaction, Milanese engineers developed a narrower V12 engine, but this strategic move came too late. While rivals like Ferrari and Renault deployed devastatingly powerful turbocharged engines, Alfa stubbornly clung to naturally aspirated designs, trailing by hundreds of horsepower. Yet amid this strategic failure, a breakthrough was quietly brewing. In 1985, engineers inside the Alfa Corse racing department initiated an unexpected rogue project. A visionary engineer named Pino D'Agostino, historically one of the most brilliant designers of his generation, engineered an elegant solution that anticipated Formula One trends by 3 years. His design philosophy was brilliantly logical. If V8s dominated Formula 3000, then the optimal compromise for the incoming 3.5-liter F1 era could not be a weak V8 or a heavy, overly complex V12. The strategic solution lay directly in the middle, a layout never before attempted in elite motorsport. A 10-cylinder V engine angled at 72 degrees. Approvals came in November 1985. D'Agostino quickly assembled an elite, highly secretive engineering team. Bodini Bordoni, Flor Gianni, Mazzoleni Rossetti, Teruzzi, and Torina. Designated Type 1035, denoting 10 cylinders and 3.5 liters, the power plant was developed with unprecedented speed. By June 1986, it was already screaming on the test bench. This was the first modern V10 engine in Formula One history, beating Honda's equivalent by a month, while strategic giant Renault would not even begin development until 1987. The struggling Italian manufacturer was suddenly leading the field. Their initial deployment strategy was highly ambitious but logically sound. The V10 was earmarked for Ligier, the French squad bound to Alfa by a strategic 3-year supply agreement. Phase 1 relied on their existing 4-cylinder turbo, with the groundbreaking V10 scheduled to debut in 1988. But corporate politics intervened. In November 1986, Alfa Romeo was stripped of its independence, completely rewriting its future. Industrial giant Fiat, having blocked a rival bid from Ford, acquired the company and instantly shifted all strategic priorities. Turin executives deemed direct track competition between brand mates Alfa Romeo and Ferrari to be an unacceptable waste of corporate resources. In-house rivalry on the starting grid was viewed as a strategic error that risked public embarrassment for both brands. Management found their perfect excuse through a bizarre public relations disaster involving Ligier driver René Arnoux. After testing the older turbo at Imola, Arnoux publicly trashed its build quality on live television, handing Fiat's brass a massive strategic weapon. These complaints were eagerly weaponized by Fiat PR operatives to orchestrate a clean break from the Ligier contract. According to technical director Gianni Tonti, Alfa used this pretext to unilaterally terminate the French team's engine contract. This left Ligier stranded just weeks before the season opener, forced to source obsolete third-party Megatron turbo engines instead. This obsolete BMW derivative doomed their 1987 campaign. Meanwhile, the world's most advanced, naturally aspirated V10, funded by a massive development budget, sat useless. A masterclass in strategic engineering locked away in an Alfa Corse warehouse, left to gather dust waiting for an unpredictable future. But as we will discover, a surprising savior was about to rescue this V10. The answer came from the most unlikely yet logical power player in the paddock, Bernie Ecclestone. The Formula One Supremo who was actively turning a traveling circus into a multi-billion-dollar media empire. He faced a very real problem. He owned Brabham, a legendary outfit that shook racing giants in the 1970s. But now, stripped of brilliant designer Gordon Murray and powerful BMW engines, Brabham was a mere shadow. Yet Ecclestone was not one to waste time mourning past glories. Instead, he was the kind of operator to invent a scheme so wild it sounded completely impossible. His inspiration came from a highly successful experiment nearly a decade earlier. In 1979 and 1980, the BMW M1 Procar Championship ran as a support race to Formula One. It was a single-make series where Formula One drivers from reigning champions to hungry young rookies battled in race-spec versions of the Bavarian coupe. The on-track action was historic. Grandstands packed and BMW sold countless road-going M1s off that exposure. Ecclestone wanted to recreate that magic, but with a radically different, far more ambitious concept. Instead of a single-make series, he envisioned a championship open to every major manufacturer. Each brand would enter its standard family sedan, the exact car sitting in dealerships across Europe. But beneath the bodywork, they would stuff a Formula One racing monster, the rulebook drawn up by Ecclestone and Max Mosley, then head of the FISA Manufacturers Commission, was a masterpiece of regulatory maneuvering. Visually, cars had to maintain the exact silhouette of a standard model with at least 25,000 units produced annually. This ensured buyers immediately linked the racer to the car sitting in their local showroom. Rear spoilers could not exceed the original factory dimensions, and the tires had to fit squarely inside the stock wheel arches. But beneath that deceptive exterior, designers enjoyed absolute freedom to unleash whatever engineering madness they could dream up. Unrestricted chassis design, composite materials, and carbon fiber. Kevlar, and crucially the beating heart, had to be a 3.5-liter naturally aspirated engine, matching the new Formula One regulations set to take effect in 1989. Essentially, Ecclestone wanted to run Formula One machinery disguised as family transport. Who could possibly turn that down? As it turned out, nearly everyone. Ecclestone pitched BMW, Mercedes, and Ford, but after analyzing the spreadsheets, each returned a polite but firm rejection. BMW, with clinical Teutonic precision, analyzed every technical detail from track width to aerodynamics, and concluded that a stock sedan's boxy shape would severely compromise cornering performance, making the series both unsafe and underwhelming. Mercedes found the projected costs unjustifiable relative to any marketing return, while Ford simply showed zero interest. Yet one contrarian manufacturer bypassed the corporate spreadsheets entirely, driven instead by a romantic, almost irrational passion for the racetrack. They already possessed a dormant 3.5-liter engine in their racing warehouse. Alfa Romeo said yes immediately, and racing history is richer for it, because the sport would be incredibly sterile without their willingness to chase impossible goals with an enthusiasm bordering on madness. Besides, the strategic alliance between Alfa Romeo and Brabham was nothing new. From 1976 to 1979, Brabham cars ran in Formula One with 12-cylinder boxer engines designed by Carlo Chiti. Ecclestone knew the depth of Milanese engineering and realized that their shelved V10 was a masterwork waiting to be revived. The joint project took shape with astonishing speed. Alfa Corsa would deliver the power and technical oversight, while Brabham handled chassis construction at their Chessington headquarters. The chassis required a body, and the choice was obvious: the Alfa Romeo 164, the brand's bold new flagship sedan. Styled by Enrico Fumia for Pininfarina and debuted at Frankfurt in 1987, it was the final car developed under independent ownership. It was already a landmark automobile, representing the first time the Milanese brand extensively used computer-aided design for a production model. Yet what Alfa Corsa and Brabham planned next was an engineering heresy no rational designer would ever contemplate. They intended to hollow the sedan out completely, discarding all factory running gear to install a full Grand Prix racing heart. This refined executive cruiser, originally designed to ferry corporate directors to high-level board meetings, was being engineered into the fastest four-door vehicle ever conceived by man. Strikingly from the outside, almost nobody would be able to distinguish it from a standard model parked on any city street. Construction commenced at Brabham's English workshop under the direct supervision of John Baldwin, one of the veteran designers of the British squad. His team was handed a development brief that sounded like a schoolboy's wild, unrestrained fantasy. Graft advanced Formula One race technology directly inside the silhouette of a standard family sedan. The resulting project produced two custom chassis designated BT5701 and BT5702, engineered to rigorous aerospace standards. At the core sat a lightweight carbon fiber monocoque tub, matching contemporary Formula One engineering. This was reinforced with Kevlar and Nomex to deliver immense structural rigidity while stripping weight down to the absolute minimum. The middle cockpit section, incorporating the front doors and factory windshield, was entirely rigid, serving as the primary structural backbone. But the real ingenuity lay in how Alfa Corsa's master fabricators resolved the complex. Let's analyze the design challenge making this beast resemble a standard 164. Both the nose and tail were massive composite clamshells, secured by quick-release latches, just like a purebred race car. Yet unlike any typical racing machine of its era, these shells were cast directly from a production 164, recreating every panel gap and seam with obsessive precision. Every shut line, even the outline of the fuel filler flap. Meanwhile, the rear windows were fashioned from lightweight plexiglass. The fake rear doors were molded right into the shells, and the paint finish was showroom perfect, masking its true racing nature. From 3 meters away, you and I would struggle to spot the difference. But get closer and peer inside, and you realize this sedan inhabited a different dimension. The cockpit was pure single-seater, featuring a tight carbon fiber bucket seat, a 6-point harness, and a racing wheel. Beside the driver sat space for a second occupant, a detail making it technically a 2-seater, though no sane person would ever volunteer to sit there during a hot lap. Right behind their shoulders, mounted in the middle just like a Formula One car, sat the Tipo 1035. This 3.5-liter V10 pushed 620 horsepower and 340 newton-meters of torque. All that power was sent to the rear wheels through a racing manual gearbox, while the Formula One-derived suspension featured extremely limited travel, engineered strictly for track use. The car weighed a mere 750 kilograms, the absolute minimum permitted by Procar regulations. To put this figure into perspective, the road-going V6 164 weighed around 1,300 kilograms, nearly double. The Procar had a power-to-weight ratio of just 1.2 kilograms per horsepower, a figure easily matching, if not exceeding, contemporary Formula One cars. The theoretical performance figures were mind-boggling. 0 to 100 in just 2.1 seconds, the quarter mile in 9.7 seconds, and a top speed that, thanks to its slick aerodynamic profile, exceeded 340 kilometers per hour. That was faster in a straight line than any period Formula One machine. When the time came to test this beast at Alfa Romeo's Bellacco Proving Grounds, test driver Giorgio Francia took the wheel. Francia was a veteran and analyst of vehicle dynamics, who knew Alfa vehicles inside out. He possessed the rare composure needed to tame a wild prototype whose on-track behavior was an absolute mystery. His initial laps revealed a machine both thrilling and terrifying. In a straight line, the Procar was a missile, an unstoppable force that accelerated with brutal violence, pinning the driver to his seat with a sheer ferocity that only a Grand Prix racer could ever truly comprehend. The closed cockpit body shape, free of the massive wings of a Formula One car, created minimal drag. This allowed the car to achieve straight-line velocities that were completely impossible for open-wheel racers back then. But the moment Francia reached the braking zone and turned in for a high-speed corner, everything changed completely. The car's track, dictated by the narrow body of the production model, was much narrower than an F1 car, severely compromising lateral stability. Crucially, the bodywork that slipped so easily through the air produced almost zero downforce. The tiny rear spoiler kept small to comply with regulations banning any aerodynamic protrusions was so useless that Francia himself recalled losing it during a test run and barely noticing any difference in the car's handling. In practical terms, the driver relied solely on mechanical tire grip through corners completely devoid of aerodynamic help. This rendered the machine highly unpredictable and nervous-prone to snapping violently if the driver got too eager on the throttle. It was a brilliant yet deeply frustrating design paradox. The fastest sedan on Earth in a straight line became one of the most treacherous machines to pilot the moment the track began to curve. Yet who cared about design limits when that screaming V10 engine note shook the earth and resonated in the chest of anyone nearby? Following those initial Bellacco trials, the Brabham team responsible for the vehicle relocated to the Alfa Corse facility in Settimo Milanese, just a few miles outside of Milan, for a brief development cycle. Time was short, budgets were tight, and crucially, they lacked the most vital element of all, an opponent. After all, why spend resources developing a racing machine when there is absolutely no championship for it to enter? Bernie Ecclestone had pitched his vision to every major European and Japanese car manufacturer, lobbying them relentlessly. He promised packed grandstands and massive global television coverage, but the response remained unchanged: polite silence or outright rejection. Development costs were astronomical. Furthermore, the safety risks of such overpowered low-downforce machines deeply worried corporate boards. But there was an even more critical strategic concern for executives. What would happen to their brand's carefully crafted image if their flagship sedan was shown crashing into barriers at 300 kilometers per hour on live television? We can understand their hesitation. Yet, even without competitors, Alfa Romeo pushed forward. Fiat management, led by Vittorio Gadella, actively collaborated with Ecclestone to launch the series, resolving to showcase the Procar at the most prestigious venue. Let's look at the stage they chose, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Monza, the home turf where the heart of every Italian racing fan beats fastest, a circuit where racing passion peaks at levels unimaginable anywhere else on Earth. Crucially, the driver selected for this public demonstration was not Giorgio Francia, the loyal test driver who knew the car's every secret, but rather Riccardo Patrese, the Padua-born champion then driving for Williams in Formula One. Strategically, the choice was a marketing masterpiece. Patrese was Italian, a Grand Prix winner, and a name the passionate Monza crowd already knew and loved. He also had deep historical ties to Alfa Romeo, having raced for Brabham when they ran Alfa engines, and directly for Alfa Corse in Group A touring cars. On that Friday afternoon in September, Patrese received highly specific instructions before climbing into the cockpit. The machine simply had not been developed enough to be pushed to its absolute limit. Safety conditions were far from ideal for a private test. The demonstration was strictly limited to a few laps, an outlap, and an inlap, merely to show the public and the cameras what this impossible sedan was capable of. But Patrese was a pure competitor. As any racing historian knows, asking a driver to go slow is like telling a fish not to swim. When the 164 Procar rolled out of the pit lane onto the Monza asphalt, the roar of its 72-degree V10 engine filled the track with an unprecedented acoustic signature. It was not the deep growl of a Ferrari V12, nor the high-pitched whine of a Renault Turbo, but something entirely new sitting somewhere between fury and music. A mechanical symphony announcing the next era of motorsport. Patrese pushed hard during those few brief laps. Exiting the famous Parabolica curve, the final turn before the main straight, he flattened the throttle, launching the 164 Procar like a red missile. Speed traps clocked the Sedan flying past the pits at well over 340 kilometers per hour. Let us analyze that figure for a moment. Not a single Formula One car present that weekend could match that speed on that very stretch of track. The grandstands erupted. Fans who had come to watch Senna and Prost battle it out found themselves witnessing a spectacle that nobody had predicted, and that no one would ever forget. A sedan, an ordinary four-door saloon, had just humiliated the fastest racing machines on Earth down the straight. Yet this historic triumph was actually a swan song, because while the crowds cheered and cameras flashed, behind closed doors, a harsh strategic reality was already clear. The Procar series would never get off the ground. Without rival manufacturers willing to invest millions, a championship was impossible. And without a series this incredible, 164 literally had nowhere left to race. It was the first and last time the public would ever witness the 164 Procar in action. A single day of life on the track, a few timed laps, and then total silence. The two chassis built by Brabham were shipped to the Alfa Romeo Museum in Arese near Milan, where they would spend the next several decades as silent monuments to a dream that never came true. Yet we would be making a mistake by thinking the story simply ends here, with two museum pieces and a silenced engine. Because that V10 engine still had stories to tell, and some of them were far more dramatic and troubled than the Procar project itself. The Type 1035, an engineering masterpiece that had electrified the Monza crowds, deserved, according to Alfa Romeo executives, a second chance. That opportunity arrived through a regulatory shift that seemed custom-written to resurrect the Milanese V10. In 1989, the FIA announced that by 1991, Group C sports cars, the pinnacle of endurance racing, must run 3.5-liter naturally aspirated engines matching Formula One regulations. For Alfa Romeo, this was a golden strategic opportunity. The engine already existed. It was powerful, fully developed, and ready to be bolted into a new chassis. Meanwhile, inside the Fiat Group, motorsport roles had been strictly divided. Lancia dominated the World Rally Championship with the Delta Integrale. Ferrari was focused solely on Formula One, leaving Alfa Romeo as the only strategic candidate to represent the group in prestigious sports prototype racing. The project was handed to Abarth, which had previously developed the chassis for the Lancia LC2, Fiat's previous entry in Group C. But before engineering a brand new car, designers had to address a critical question. Could a V10, born for short Formula One sprints, survive the brutal 6, 12, and 24-hour demands of endurance racing? To find out, Alfa Corse bought a Lancia LC2 chassis from privateer Gianni Musato, transforming it into a rolling test bed designated as Project SE047. Track testing began at the Bolocco circuit with highly encouraging early results. The engine ran strong. Performance met every expectation. But as the hours of continuous operation piled up, severe reliability issues surfaced. The V10, built to endure the distance of a single Grand Prix, roughly 300 kilometers, was strategically incapable of surviving the endless stress of endurance competition. The engine's high-strung Italian nature, both beautiful and fragile, proved to be an insurmountable obstacle within their tight development budget. At this point, a decision was handed down that deeply wounded the pride of the Milanese engineers. Fiat management decreed that the Alfa Romeo V10 must be replaced by a 3.5-liter Ferrari V12, the Type 036, the very engine powering Maranello's Formula One entries. This power plant was vastly superior on paper, pushing 680 horsepower compared to Alfa's 620, and featuring advanced electronic management. But for the engineers at Alfa Corse, accepting a Ferrari heart inside their own racing machine was like forcing an AC Milan supporter to wear an Inter shirt. It was technically sound, yet strategically devastating. Meanwhile, former Osella engineer Giuseppe Petroda had designed the chassis for the new SE048 SP. The vehicle was a masterclass in aerodynamic efficiency, boasting a clean carbon fiber monocoque, unconventional front-mounted radiators, and covered rear wheels, engineered specifically to minimize drag. On the nose, one detail made every Alfista's heart race: the outline of the historic triangular Alfa Romeo shield integrated into the tip of the bodywork like an artist's signature. At least one complete prototype was built and put through track testing, but corporate fate was already preparing to strike yet another devastating blow. In September 1990, just as the project seemed poised for its racing debut, Fiat executives dropped the axe. The World Sports Car Championship was rapidly losing its appeal. With fewer manufacturers investing, Bernie Ecclestone's calculated predictions were playing out with surgical precision. Group C was dead in the water, destined to collapse entirely by 1992. For Fiat continuing to invest millions into a prototype powered by their internal rival's Maranello engine in a category destined for extinction made no strategic or economic sense. The SE048 SP project was axed, sent to the Arise Museum alongside the legendary 164 Procar, another magnificent machine condemned to never race. But here is the strategic twist that reframes this entire historical narrative. The budget reserved for Group C was suddenly redirected toward a completely different venture, developing the Alfa Romeo 155 for touring car racing, a choice that initially seemed like a painful defeat, turned out to be a strategic masterstroke. In 1993, the 155 dominated the German DTM, humiliating Mercedes and Opel on their own home turf. And the following year, they seized the British Touring Car Championship, the famous BTCC. The Bichon had returned, winning with a ferocity reminiscent of their 1950s glory days. Meanwhile, Pino D'Agostino, the engineer behind their revolutionary 1985 V10 engine, left Alfa Romeo for Ferrari, bringing his immense expertise in high-performance engine design straight to Maranello. He helped build the juggernaut that would dominate Formula One in the early 2000s. That same V10 configuration he pioneered became the absolute standard of Formula One from 1996 to 2005. An entire motorsport era ruled by a concept born in Alfa Corse. History's very first V10 never started a single race. Yet its DNA powered nearly every championship contender for almost 2 decades. If this historical autopsy intrigued you, leave a comment detailing which Alfa Romeo we should investigate next. Hit the like button to support our analysis, and subscribe if you have not already to ensure you never miss our next investigations into the machines that shaped history.